Part of what makes Shadowrun unique is that it's more than just a dystopian cyberpunk setting with a high level of technology. It's also a fantasy setting, complete with fantastic and wonderfully terrible creatures and even magic. Magic is a staple of the fantasy genre, and it's a term that covers a wide range of phenomenon. In Shadowrun, you have two different kinds of people that use magic. Magicians, who cast spells, infuse magic into things, and consort with otherworldly creatures, and Adepts, who are more akin to monks that use mystical energy to perform phenomenal physical feats. With those two classifications, you wind up with four different kinds of mages. Magicians and Adepts, which I described earlier, Mystic Adepts, which can use the abilities of both a magician and an adept, and Aspected Magicians, who can only use one of the three abilities that magicians would otherwise have full access to. Magic isn't something a character can simply learn one day, though. This means that you have to pick the right priority during character creation for the kind of mage you want to play. Further, if you choose a priority that grants you magic, you need to choose your tradition of magic. The core rulebook details two of these, Shamanic and Hermetic. I'll cover more about those in just a moment. Technomancers are also technically a magical character, but at the same time, they're not. I cover more about how they work in the hacking and rigging video. One final note about technomancy is this though. You can't be a magician and also a technomancer. It's an exclusive or. You can be one or the other, but not both. However, it is possible to be both a magician and an adept at the same time. With all that said, let's look into just how magic works. Magicians are perhaps the most convoluted part of this game. As I mentioned earlier, magicians have three separate purviews. Sorcery, which is spellcasting and disrupting spells, Conjuring, which deals with summoning and banishing spirits, and Enchanting, which is putting magic into physical objects, or removing it from them. If you're playing as an Aspected Magician, you only get one of those three facets. Magicians proper and Mystic Adepts are able to use all three. Force is going to be a recurring term you'll see in the magic section of the book, but it's just a numerical representation of how powerful something is magically, be it a spell, spirit, or focus. You also have what's referred to as your astral limit, which is either your mental or social limit, whichever is greater. And anytime you use magic, you suffer from drain, which is basically damage you take for using magic. In most cases, it's stun, though there may be some circumstances where it'll be physical. For sorcery and enchantment, the spell or preparation descriptions will list just how much the drain is. For conjuring tests, it's however many hits the spirit gets to resist being summoned times 2. Drain is usually stun damage, though there are certain circumstances that'll make it physical. The roll for resisting drain is determined by a character's magic tradition. Beyond this, your tradition is mostly just a cosmetic part of your character. The two traditions presented in the core rulebook are Hermetic Mage and Shaman. Hermetic Mages are your traditional wizards that believe magic is like a formula, and following specific rituals will yield specific effects. Thus, they resist drain using logic and willpower. Shamans are more spiritual, perhaps even religious, and believe that magic is asking the spirits to grant their power, and so they resist drain using charisma and willpower. Spellcasting is relatively simple. You choose a spell your character knows, choose a target, choose the force rating you want to cast it at, and roll, referring to the spell's description for what it does. Your dice pool for casting is your spellcasting skill and your magic attribute, limited by the force of the spell. The complete rules for this start on page 281. Let's say, for example, you wanted to nuke somebody with a magic spell. Most of the spells follow a predictable formula of having touch, single target range, or area of effect range, though a few family of spells omit the touch effect. We'll go with Shatter, since getting up close and personal is a worthwhile trade-off for having a low drain. The T for Shatter, of course, means touch, while F-6 under drain is the force of the spell, -6. Our force for the spell can be up to twice our magic, so let's say for the sake of argument, we have 4 magic. This means we can go ahead and bolster this up to 8 force. We would then roll our spellcasting and magic attribute, limited by the 8 force. Let's say for this example our spellcasting is 6, giving us a total of 10 dice, and we come up with 6 hits. For combat spells, if it's a direct spell like Shatter, the target can roll to resist the effects of the spell, but not the damage it causes. So if our defender only gets 2 hits on a body roll, they'll be taking 4 physical damage from this spell as we magically smash and break the bones in their body. However, we still have to take Drain for this. Luckily, it's only 2 Drain dice since we went with Shatter. Unluckily though, since we got 4 hits on our magic rating for this spell, it's physical damage. They're not the only ones who are going to be hurting because of this. Rituals in Alchemy follow a similar process to spellcasting, with a few steps added or changed to reflect that it's a lengthier kind of spell being cast, or magic is being sealed into an object to be released later. The complete rules for rituals start on page 295, and they use their own list of different possible effects. Alchemy, on the other hand, starts on page 304, and actually uses the same list of effects as spellcasting. However, just because you know a spell through sorcery doesn't mean you can cast it with alchemy as well, or vice versa. If you want to cast Fireball through alchemy, you need to learn the alchemy version of the spell, even if you already know the sorcery version. Summoning is a different matter from all this altogether, though. It starts off similar enough, with you deciding the sort of spirit you want to summon and the force of the spirit. The sort of spirit available to you is determined by your character's tradition. At least that's what the rulebook says. Oddly enough though, it never specifies which spirits belong to which tradition. The list of spirits, by the way, is on page 303. After you've decided how strong of a spirit you wish to bring into the world, you roll your summoning and magic, limited by the force of the spirit. Meanwhile, the spirit will resist the summoning using double its force. Every net hit you get over it is how many tasks it owes you before it's allowed to return to its own world, while if it gets more hits than you, it doesn't even show up. Regardless of if and how well you succeed, you suffer drain for summoning a spirit, and that drain is equal to double the amount of hits the spirit scores while resisting. For more information regarding what powers of the spirits can do, those start on page 394, and are presented in alphabetical order. The last 2 things regarding magicians I want to talk about are focuses and reagents. If you flip through some of the magic pages, you've probably noticed some of the different sections mentioning reagents. The measurement for reagents is in drams, which are roughly 5 grams, or the weight of a pistol bullet. The most common use for reagents is that they can be used to set the limit for most magical actions. If you use 20 drams while casting a spell, you set the limit to 20 instead of whatever the force of the spell is. There's 2 ways to acquire reagents. They can be harvested by searching for about an hour in an area, and then making an alchemy and magic test, limited by your mental limit. Every 2 successes there gets you 1 dram. However, if a character is feeling particularly lazy, or needs them quick, the street price for a dram is roughly 20 new yen. In addition to temporarily giving you a higher limit for most magical actions, reagents are also necessary for certain other actions, like binding spirits or creating a focus using artificing. There are several different kinds of focuses, and each one serves a different purpose. As a general rule, focuses add their own force rating to the dice pool of the magical action they were made to assist with. However, it's not enough to simply have the focus. Your character also has to bond with it, which, in terms of game mechanics, takes both game time and karma. With the power of a focus, combined with an abundance of reagents, even a character with a low magic rating can become a tremendous magical threat. Adept powers are the simpler set of the 2 kinds of magic, and they come in 2 varieties, intrinsic and activated. Intrinsic powers are the kind of a power that are always active, whereas activated powers you have to decide when you want to use them. The way you get the powers is determined by if you're a mystic adept or a physical adept, with the latter being the sort that can only use the adept powers, no other magic. Physical adepts gain a number of power points equal to their magic rating, and with those they're allowed to gain as many levels as that in different powers. You're not allowed to have any of the levels of your powers go above your magic attribute though, regardless of how many points it costs to buy a particular power. This is important to know since some of the powers only cost fraction of a power point. Mystic Adepts instead need to spend 2 of their starting karma for each power point they want at character creation. However, once character creation is through, whenever you gain a point in your magic attribute, regardless of if you're a physical or mystic adept, you gain an additional power point. So that's a brief guide to how magic works in Shadowrun. This is by far one of the more diverse magic systems I've seen in any game, and it's got plenty of risks to balance out the rewards of relying on it. It's, all in all, a very risky business. So, with all that said, I'm Aaron there, Shadel, and I'll see you all in the shadows. Chummer. Thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you found this video useful, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. This concludes my guide to Shadowrun for the time being. In the future, I might take a look at some of the other rulebooks and show you what all they add to the game. Until then though, I'll have plenty of stuff from other games for you.